The Humongous Entertainment logo sound effect is basically what my brain felt like at the end of this. Edutainment games dominated the 90s and 2000s. If you grew up with a computer anywhere in that time, you've probably at least been exposed to one. You know, edutainment games, the games for kids that are mostly just video games, but they try to teach you things too. Sometimes they were fairly blatant on the educational part, like the Jumpstart series, but others lean more into the entertainment side of things and disguise the educational part with puzzles and problem-solving skills. The second strategy is obviously much preferred by kids for obvious reasons. They're not going to want to play a game as frequently if they're being taught while they play it. Enter Humongous Entertainment, a developer founded by two ex-LucasArts employees who started off producing point-and-click adventure games for kids, which they called Junior Adventures. And the first game released by Humongous in 1992 was a little game called Putt-Putt Joins the Parade. This purple car would be at the helm of the developer's roster for a while, releasing 7 mainline games in the Putt-Putt series. I, for one, enjoyed the hell out of a select few of these games and always thought fondly on them, so when I went back and watched a few playthroughs, well, they're just silly games meant to be enjoyed by kids, not something to be thought about too hard. But thinking about things too hard is my job, and there's a lot of confusing and odd stuff about this series, this world that's packed into these small packages. I'm not here to give a retrospective of the game or even just plot breakdowns. No, I'm here to chronicle and observe this strange, undocumented world to try and make sense of it, like a Charles Darwin for cars. So let's get started. To begin with, it would help to understand what we're even looking at for those of you that aren't familiar with the series. The games follow a basic formula. Putt-Putt, a small purple convertible car, is trying to take part in or help out at some event and usually receives a list of tasks that need to be completed or items to find before he can verb the noun described in the title of the game. They're basic point-and-click adventure games that allow kids to exercise their puzzle-solving and pattern recognition skills. Putt-Putt is portrayed as being around the age of kids who'd be playing the game and acts mostly as a stand-in for the kids, but still retains a personality of his own. Locations aren't overly complicated, and there's a lot of background elements and mini-games to play to keep the players entertained while completing the side quest. Nearly all elements of the screen have an animation or noise that plays if you click on them, most just played for laughs and don't have any actual effect on the story. Cars are the primary characters of this world. Just like our cars, they come in all different shapes and sizes with different utilities to do different jobs, but most of them share some similarities. One of the problems with a lot of media that features sentient vehicles is trying to address how they grab and use items. This world's solution is actually a fairly decent idea, using the car's radio antenna as an appendage that can extend, bend, and grab as a sort of pseudo-hand. Other than the antenna, the cars seem to function primarily as normal cars. They're able to get flat tires, use gas, etc. We'll cover all that later. We might go in-depth with some plot points of the games later on, but for right now, I just want to give a quick rundown of each of the game's basic plots to kind of catch you up to speed. Putt-Putt Joins the Parade is the first and most basic game in the series. Cartown, Putt-Putt's hometown, is having the annual Cartown Pet Parade where all the cars join and show off their pets. Putt-Putt, however, doesn't have a pet, but he's always wanted a puppy. That day, while running errands, Putt-Putt finds a lost puppy in a cave and rescues him.
Sounds like there's a puppy in there. You look scared. Would you like to be my pet in the parade? I'll call you Pep.
Together, Putt-Putt and his new friend Pep finish a list of chores before joining the parade. Simple and quick game, which makes sense as it was the first one that Humongous ever developed. Putt-Putt Goes to the Moon, like all the other games in the series, has a Self-explanatory title. The local firework manufacturer, Mr. Firebird, asks Putt-Putt, a child, to come volunteer at his fireworks factory. Things go wrong though when Pep pulls a giant do-not-touch lever while chasing a butterfly, causing Mr. Firebird's giant experimental firework to go flying around the room, picking up Putt-Putt and Pep and launching them into space. After drifting aimlessly for a bit in space, Putt-Putt crash lands on the moon where he meets Rover, moon rover, who's stuck on the moon, and they work together and help out the local aliens in order to assemble a rocket ship and return home. We go back to a more down-to-earth plot with Putt-Putt saves the zoo. As Putt-Putt's home, and it's the grand opening day of the Cartown Zoo. After meeting the zookeeper, Outback Al, he learns things keep breaking down and several of the baby animals have gone missing in different areas of the zoo.
Here, this should help you out. It's a list of everyone who's missing.
Baby Jumbo the elephant, Masai the giraffe, Kenya the lion cub, Zanzibar the hippopotamus, Sammy Seal, and Little Skeeter the snake.
While Al works on fixing everything up, Putt-Putt volunteers to go around and find all the missing animals and return them to their normal habitats. At the end of the day, everything is fixed and the zoo opens with Putt-Putt earning the title of Junior Zookeeper. Bouncing back into the sci-fi realm, Putt-Putt travels through time, holds no surprises with what might happen in the plot. Putt-Putt explains to Pep that Mr. Firebird asked for his help with something again, so before school, the two travel to his laboratory, which we see is now in the closed-down fireworks factory. I guess after the moon incident, Firebird was banned from making any more rockets, so he became an inventor. Mr. Firebird shows Putt-Putt what his latest invention is, a time portal, which acts as a window into different periods of time.
Where can you go in it, Mr. Firebird?
Nowhere at all, I don't think. You see, it's not meant for actual travel, but it gives you a way to see into the past and the future through the time portal.
Randomly and without warning, the portal begins to malfunction, shooting out a time vortex and sucking up Pep along with Putt-Putt's school supplies and homework. A Firebird tells Putt-Putt the portal won't close until all the items are brought back, so it's up to again, a child, to travel through time and retrieve his items in Pep. Traveling between prehistory, the Middle Ages, the Old West, and the future, Putt-Putt manages to collect a few of the out-of-place items and return home just in time to make it to school. Putt-Putt enters the race is, honestly, next to Joins the Parade, the most mundane and boring of the original mainline games. There's going to be a race at the Cartown Speedway, and Putt-Putt wants to participate, so one of the race cars, Redline Rick, gives Putt-Putt a list of all the things he needs and has to do to join.
Well, Putt-Putt, if you want to be a race car, you have to be able to grip the road, race like the Dickens, and always keep safety first.
The entirety of the game takes place in Cartown, so there's not much change in scenery. You finish the tasks and Putt-Putt gets to race. That's about it. In Putt-Putt Joins the Circus, Putt-Putt and Pep are on their way to B.J. Sweeney's Big Top Circus in Apple Valley. But when stopping to help a train, their ticket gets eaten by a goat that was blocking the track. Fortunately, it turns out that Cassidy, the train they helped, actually works for the circus and offers to give them a ride. Arriving at the Big Top, Cassidy tells Putt-Putt to explain his situation to the ringmaster and see about getting a new ticket. Par for the course, upon meeting Sweeney, he finds out things aren't going too swell with the circus setup, as a lot of the performers are on strike until certain conditions are met.
When we pulled in here, nothing got put in the right place. Oh, my 5 main acts are crying mutiny, and the other acts are having problems too.
Instead of handling this as an adult, Sweeney decides to put Putt-Putt up to the task and asks him to convince the performers to return and do their acts. After doing chores and meeting people's demands, Putt-Putt finally gathers all the performers back together for opening night and gets to contribute in the closing act. Last, and certainly least, Putt-Putt Pep's Birthday Surprise finishes off the series as the last game published in 2003. Everything about this game just screams, hey, Infogrames Atari just bought Humongous Entertainment, and we want to squeeze one last payday out of this franchise that has been concluded for 3 years. They couldn't even be bothered to change the name to fit the verbs the noun format. Even something that didn't make sense, like Putt-Putt Takes the Cake or Putt-Putt Throws the Party, would have been preferred to the ugly colon in the title. Anyway, long story short, Pep's Birthday Surprise is just as the title explains. Putt-Putt throws a surprise birthday party for Pep. Nothing really complicated or special about this one, except for the fact that Putt-Putt hit car puberty.
Hello, Mr. Kibble. What kinds of puppy food do you have today? I'd like to get something special for Pep.
There are also other games out there like Dog on a Stick and Putt-Putt's Funhouse, but most of those are just minigame collections or activity packs and don't really have any deeper implications or plot connections. Throughout everything, Cartown stays much the same, aside from a few inconsistencies in locations and building appearances. The main town square consists of a toy store, a gas station, a fire station, a car wash, a grocery store, and a custom shop. Outside of the town square, you have a residential area and a library, and on the outskirts is the local farm. As time goes on, certain locations are added where needed in the plot, like the Cartown Zoo or the tire shop. Whoever planned the layout for Cartown, though, either didn't realize how many cars would be going in and out of it, or just wanted to exercise their cartoonishly bad urban planning muscles. To get to the residential area of Cartown, there is a 6-way intersection. Not a 6-way stop, a 6-way intersection. Out of all the points where all the roads meet, only one of them has a stoplight. The other 5 points are free-flowing cross-traffic. To make matters worse, further down one of these roads is a 1-lane tunnel. Does this tunnel have any traffic lights or anything to indicate when other cars are driving through? No. Instead, the cars have to honk their horn before entering to alert any cars that may be on the other side who are going through.
Uh-oh! I honked. It's my turn.
For such a busy town, most of the roads are dirt roads as well. The only roads that are different, being brick roads, are the ones leading into the residential area, and that's only because the bricks are color coordinated according to the street names: Red Street, Green Street, and Blue Street.
Hey, editing Noah here. Yeah, that's just not true. A good majority of the roads in Cartown are in fact paved, as long as it's in the commercial or residential areas. Most of the side roads that aren't connected to the main parts of town are the ones that are dirt, and most of the roads that appear in other games that take place outside of Cartown are dirt roads.
There also isn't a road out of Cartown. Every road connects to a different part of town or results in a dead end eventually. Maybe they're just cutting down on costs of asphalt. We don't see any towns outside of Cartown, at least in the present. The nearest we get is the Circus, which is near Apple Valley, a town said to be around 147 miles away from Cartown. As far as we know, it's probably similar in appearance from what we can tell by the environment around the circus: lush greenery, dirt roads, the usual. Like I said though, that's in the present. Don't forget that our little indigo adventurer here has traveled through time. In the Old West, Putt-Putt explores the region of Tire Flats, a standard area that you'd see in any media connected to cowboys and western themes. The entirety of Tire Flats is connected via railroad with the main station at the general store. It seems like the general store and the nearby barn are the only places that have inhabitants in them, as the closest town, Hubcap Hill, is now a ghost town as the nearby rock mines shut down. He also visits the future with another stereotypical layout of flying cars, floating buildings, and platforms, the works. We're never given a name for the city we explore, but it seems to be made to at least slightly resemble Cartown. The medieval era gives us another unnamed location, this time being a castle in the middle of the woods. In the castle lives King Chariot and his family and court, but that's about all we know about the location, is the interior of the castle itself. The last of the areas we see in Travels Through Time is a glimpse into prehistory, which it doesn't look much different from the area outside of Cartown in the present. The difference is there's dinosaurs and the plant life is older extinct species. Putt-Putt's adventures aren't just confined to Earth, as we know. On the moon, things are... well, they're also kind of the same. I guess the aliens who live on the moon aren't great at urban planning either. Moontown is a small area, all things considered, with the town square comprised of a diner, an ice cream stand, and the governor's office. On the outskirts of town, there's a beauty salon, a playground, an apartment complex, and the manor of a man in the moon. A bit anticlimactic. Of course, the environment isn't the only thing that builds up the world, it's the characters as well. And what better place to start with characters than the titular protagonist himself?
I'm Putt-Putt.
Yeah, sure, I know he's a kid, but there are certain moments in the games where you just have to take pause and think, what the hell? For the most part, he's just a goofy little kid running around, playing with his dog, and getting into silly little adventures. But as you spend more time with him, you realize he's actually fairly selfish and conceited when it comes to what he wants. If Putt-Putt sees anything laying around with the word free even remotely close to it, he'll immediately yoink it and stash it in his inventory. Free birdseed? Sure. Free batteries? You bet. I don't care if I need it yet. I don't care if I even need it at all. It's free. Even if it doesn't say free, if it's just laying around in a tool shed. Oh, I may need this for later, so I might as well take it with me. They won't mind if I borrow it. He'll also just lie to himself to justify stealing something when he's rummaging around. In Enters the Race, he fishes around in the coin slot of a payphone and finds a quarter.
So that's where I left my coin.
Bullshit! You just so happen to leave a coin in the return slot on this particular payphone. I'm not buying it, kid. Aside from being a borderline kleptomaniac, Putt-Putt is a terrible pet owner and friend to Pep. The sheer amount of disrespect and disregard this kid has for the dog he claims is his best friend is buck wild. In Travels Through Time, he meets these weird sentient clock things in the time stream. Trust me, we'll talk more about them later. But they explain using the portals to other times will help him find Pep. And what does this kid respond with?
That's where you'll find Pep and my homework.
And my homework? Like, yeah, sure, bud, if that's the thing you're more worried about than your living, breathing friend. He also volunteers Pep for things without his consent, like hosting an entire circus troupe of fleas, or using him as part of a magic trick that sends him to another dimension.
Wow, where did Pep go?
I assure you that Pep is safe and sound. He is currently experiencing another dimension of reality on an altered plane of existence beyond imagination.
Hell, if you want to know how bad of an owner he is, just look no further than the final game, Pep's Birthday Surprise. The entire premise of the game is that Putt-Putt has never thrown Pep a birthday party since he first got him. Putt-Putt uses the excuse of, oh well, I rescued him so I don't know his birthday, to which the very first rational adult he talks to about it is just like, just celebrate his birthday on the anniversary of when you two met. An idea Putt-Putt apparently never considered to be an option. Meanwhile, Putt-Putt is bending over backwards for the other cars to complete the stupidest menial tasks just for a bit of recognition, but can't give that same respect and courtesy to Pep. Even with his weird behaviors, you kinda have to stop and think about why he is the way that he is. Not once in any piece of media do we catch a glimpse or mention of Putt-Putt's parents or guardians. Most of the houses we see in Cartown are only large enough to house a single car, and Putt-Putt's house is no exception, which I think he's like the town orphan or something. Think about it. All the other cars in town know who he is by name, and he's frequently running errands and doing chores for the adults in exchange for some sort of compensation. His house is also like noticeably further away than any of the other residential areas. Even the local farm is closer to town than his house is. Evidently, from some lines in the first game too, he seems to stink. One of the first things Smokey the fire truck tells Putt-Putt he has to do before joining the parade is he needs a car wash. And you may say, oh, okay, well, he's just saying you gotta look nice and clean to be in the parade. But then later, just as he's about to enter the car wash, Putt-Putt says this.
I never had a car wash before. Uh-oh.
Has he never been cleaned? I feel bad for him, but I also feel kinda bad for the cars around him.
Get your tires put on and tune your engine up.
The cars Putt-Putt meets are a varied bunch of folks. As I said in the beginning, they have most traits in common with normal cars, but there are some things that make you raise an eyebrow, such as all the cars have some version of the cartoon floating eyebrows that allow them to express and emote more. This isn't super strange, and in a cartoon environment, there are some liberties that have to be taken in order to allow your characters to be expressive. What that doesn't explain, though, is the presence of facial hair on some of the cars. Mr. Baldini the Grocer and Marvin the Magnificent, a magician from the circus, both have prominent mustaches. Now, we see in the same game Marvin appears in, BJ Sweeney is wearing what appears to be a pair of fake eyebrows and a fake mustache, as mid-conversation he realizes he has them swapped and changes them around. We can tell the eyebrows are fake not just because because he moved the position, but they sit near the brim of his top hat as well and don't move at all when he emotes. So maybe Marvin and Mr. Baldini are just wearing fake mustaches too? I don't think so. Outback Al has a very clear 5 o'clock shadow and stubble covering his entire lower face, but maybe his car model is just that way for some strange reason, like some front bumper accessories. Is that so? Then explain this photo of Outback Al shaving. Yeah, that's right, these cars are capable of growing organic facial hair. And plenty of the characters Putt-Putt meets while traveling through time have great big bushy mustaches and beards as well. Some of the lady cars have hair on the top of their heads. I don't have any evidence that points toward them definitively not being wigs, but considering the men can have beards, it's not out of the realm of possibility. There are oddities, like Princess Chassis, who doesn't have actual hair on the top of her head, but rather the top of her carriage is designed in a way to resemble front curls. Or Smokey, who doesn't have any clearly defined facial hair, but rather his face has rivets and metal in place of where stubble would be, to give that same illusion. So it's not safe to say all cars can grow hair, but at least some of them can. And those who don't are often modeled to appear as though they do. The other biggest thing that gives me pause about how these cars' bodies work is when Putt-Putt says this line.
Wow! I can see again.
His eyes aren't there. You see the problem here? A significant portion of the other cars have the basic eye placement where their eyes are just in place of where their windshield would be. So it would make sense if any of the others were cleaning off their windshield and said that line, but Putt-Putt is one of the only cars who has eyes in place of his headlights instead. He's one of the only characters where it wouldn't make sense for him to say that. Oh, you know how I mentioned some of the cars have specialized features? You know, like how Smokey is a fire truck and has a ladder? Rover is the only car I found who doesn't have a basic antenna. Instead, Rover has a telescoping claw arm. It acts in the same way as the antenna, but is seemingly stronger as he uses it to lift Putt-Putt on several occasions. None of the other cars have anything even remotely close to this. We don't even see this with the strongest car he meets, Ivan the Strongvan, who lifts a 1-ton weight with just his antenna. Which, by the way, we see him flex, as if there's a muscle in there, and I'm not touching that one. In every game we see Rover in, he uses his claw arm. That is, until for whatever reason, at the very end, in the credit photo montage of Pep's birthday surprise, we see him using an antenna. Did he have that this whole time? Is this something new he had added on? We never find out, and it's sprung on us at the very end of the last game in the series. Of course, it's a children's game. There's gonna be a lot of unanswered questions. Like, we know the cars can have babies and children in some capacity. In Joins the Parade, Mrs. Airbag asks Putt-Putt to find her baby who got lost in the movie theater. And at the end of Travels Through Time, we see a classroom full of child cars at Putt-Putt's school. Clearly procreation, let alone the procreation of talking cars, isn't a topic that would be discussed in a kid's game. We don't know if they're born organically or manufactured, and if they grow up organically or replace parts as they grow up and get older. I personally lean more towards the notion that these cars are somehow manufactured, with multiple cars being produced of the same make and model. I believe this for two specific reasons. There are 3 identical food carts who appear at different points throughout the series. In Saves the Zoo, Putt-Putt meets Chuckwagon, a food cart who sells snacks and drinks. He's a tall red cart with a hollow side to keep his wares in. A few games later, we see 2 more identical carts. One of them looks exactly like Chuck, but him and Putt-Putt interact as if they've never met each other before, leading me to believe it's a different character. The only difference the other cart has is she's blue rather than red. Even if the red one is just Chuck again, there's still at least 2 carts with identical builds. Secondly, in Enters the Race, very close to the end of the game as Putt-Putt crosses the finish line, there is another Putt-Putt in the crowd. Sure, this could just be a coincidence and the background artists reused the design, but to reuse a design so similar to your main character, it's kinda strange. Mentioning the race, there are different types of gas the cars can consume to make them drive faster, which Doesn't seem like it should be legal in a sports setting. But Redline Rick tells Putt-Putt he needs it to enter the race, so I suppose performance-enhancing drugs are just legalized here. And yes, the cars do still run on gasoline. Don't ask me how or why this segment is dragged on long enough. The world isn't just inhabited by cars, though. No, there are other types of vehicles who get the living treatment as well. I already mentioned Cassidy the Train and Princess Chassis, who's a chariot. There's others that are a bit more unconventional and borderline cruel to bring to life. Take the princess's friend, Woodward, a wooden cart. That's all he is. He's made to carry firewood and logs, and that's about it. Then there's Reginald Windbag III, an anthropomorphic helium tank whose sole purpose in life is to fill up balloons. You've got other abnormalities, too. In prehistory, Putt-Putt meets Wheel, he's a wheel. This brings up even more questions about evolution and the whole living car thing and where they are, and okay, fine, I'll talk about it. What the hell are these things? Are they actually sentient cars? Are they organic beings? If they're normal cars, what caused them to evolve into this? With the presence of Wheel and other descendants of cars throughout history, we clearly know they've at least been like this for a couple thousand, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Regardless of this, I know humans are or have been around at some point and used cars as tools and vehicles. I haven't mentioned it until now, but this is the entire premise of Rover's backstory. He was brought to the moon by some astronauts and abandoned when they went back to Earth. We see human astronauts in Rover's flashback.
The name's Rover, and have I got quite a story to tell. I was brought here from Earth by some astronauts, but when they went home, I was left behind.
That's too bad.
All they left me was this picture of the moon. You can have it if you like.
Not to mention, there are plenty of human-sized items and clothing you can find littered through the games. There's a shop that sells rollerblades, for fuck's sake. What car is gonna be putting their feet in those? So, where are they? Where are the humans? Clearly they're roaming around somewhere. In Saves the Zoo, we see a billboard advertising a human concert.
But Noah, that could just be a cheeky reference to the band that made the game's music.
Then I think it's time to take this search for clues northward. For I have a certain holly and jolly ace in the hole. Yes, Santa Claus exists. And he's not a living sleigh or a magical car. He's the same rosy-cheeked, belly-like-a-bowl-full-of-jelly man that you and I both know. He only makes one appearance in the book Putt-Putt's Night Before Christmas. Yeah, that's right, I'm bringing the books into this. Aside from interacting with cars, Santa's job seems to be the same. Putt-Putt's not surprised to see Santa, and the big man pays no mind to the fact he's delivering presents to a talking car. So what's going on here? My theory here, and this is just what I put together from all the notes I've taken through this whole thing. The world Putt-Putt lives in is some sort of twisted Planet of the Apes-like world, where humans do exist but are no longer the dominant species. Instead, humans are kept distant from cars in their own areas and towns, hence why we have car-themed names like Tire Flats and Cartown, and then other innocuous names like Apple Valley. The humans aren't enslaved, but maybe they're discriminated against or shunned for the most part, barring some more famous humans like what we saw with the Billboard concert. Perhaps the cars rose up after centuries of working together with the humans. I mean, Rover was helping the astronauts after all. Maybe they got sick of being used as tools. Okay, maybe that's all a bit too extreme to bring real-world parallels I personally have no experience with into this kid's game. When you've been staring at this little purple car for almost 3 weeks, your brain gets a little mushy. Anyway.
Welcome to the zoo. So you can see the kangaroos, and the tigers too.
The vehicles aren't the only residents of this world. You have the animals as well. And you may be thinking, well, of course there's animals. No, I mean, like, these animals are actual residents of Cartown, contributing members of society. Yes, the Putt-Putt world is faced with that good old Disney problem of some animals being hyper-intelligent and can talk, while others are just normal animals. And the implications of this make things even more confusing. Because there's the zoo. Remember? Almost all the animals that live in the zoo can talk, think, rationalize, yet they're in a zoo being shown off to tourists. Wouldn't it be super demeaning and ethically horrible to do, caging these creatures with the same intelligence as the ones who captured them? Well, no. And joins the circus. Two of the characters Putt-Putt runs into are baby Jambo the elephant and his mother, who he first met in Saves the Zoo. Jambo explains he's basically touring with the circus as part of a summer job, and his mom is just tagging along to travel. It's not a lot to go on, but with this, I think in some capacity the zoo is more like apartments for the animals, rather than caged habitats. They seem free to come and go as they please at any time, which also makes sense since the baby animals were lost in habitats that weren't their own. So the animals in the zoo aren't trapped, they're just volunteering to live there? Because there's plenty of talking animals all over the place, in the past, in the present, in the future. Horses, brachiosaurs, fleas, they can all talk and live their own independent lives. And no, I don't know why Pep is one of the few who can't talk. Initially, I thought it could be since he was a puppy, but the baby animals talk as well. Maybe it's some environmental thing where he wasn't born around talking animals or cars or something. I don't know, dude. Putt-Putt makes a habit out of meeting some strange and unusual folks, and the timepieces are no different. Their alleged official name is the Time Continuums, but that makes them sound like a lame doo-wop group. The timepieces are those sentient clocks I mentioned earlier. An hourglass, a stopwatch, a digital clock, and a sundial. They appear in the time stream as Putt-Putt enters the time portal in, well, I'm sure you can guess which game. And they explain through song what Putt-Putt needs to do to fix time, along with going on a philosophical tangent about how everything and everyone, including him, is always present in the flow of time, and it will continue to go on forever. This is the only interaction the timepieces have with Putt-Putt throughout the entire game, and never go on to be seen or mentioned again, living in Putt-Putt's memory only as these otherworldly deities who appeared to him outside of all known reality. Putt-Putt Goes to the Moon definitely has the largest character roster in all the games in terms of characters who appear on screen. The aliens Putt-Putt meets, primarily on the moon, are varied in appearance and size. The only two aliens who really help him are the governor of Moontown, Governor Moonbeam, and the owner of the repair garage, Robbie Radar. Governor Moonbeam is unique, as the lower half of his body is comprised of wheels while his upper half is still organic. He's the only alien I can recall who has any sort of body modification. Robbie Radar is just a silly little guy who has two satellite-shaped protrusions on his head. The only other notable person in Goes to the Moon, I'm not sure I'd classify him as a typical alien, but it's a man in the moon.
Don't you mean the man in the moon?
No, he's a man in the moon. That's even what he calls himself. Unless it's some weird audio artifacting and I'm completely mishearing him, he says a man in the moon.
Hello, little one. I am the man in the moon.
Editing Noah here again. I do not care what the subtitles say. He says a man in the moon, and you cannot tell me otherwise. I have believed this since I was like 7 years old. Nobody's gonna change my mind about that, not even the official subtitles of the game.
I am the man in the moon. The man in the moon. The man in the man.
A man in the moon, in a way, implies there's more than one person like him. Putt-Putt only interacts with a man in the moon for a brief while, and we don't learn much about him other than he lives alone in a big mansion, and the only thing he's ever wanted in life is a photo of himself. To fulfill his request, Putt-Putt gives him a picture of the moon that Rover gave him earlier, even trying to comprehend how that all makes sense with him being in the moon, but is the moon in the photo isn't even worth attempting. In order of the series, a man in the moon is also the first person we ever see to use magic, cementing the fact magic exists in universe for later games, but is usually used for cheap 2-bit magician tricks from Marvin. The reason I chose to discuss these three is they're the ones who provide Putt-Putt with the items he needs to finish assembling the rocket to head home, and so are more plot crucial. Oh, yeah, we need to talk about Out of all the fun ways the game carries plot continuity, the rocket is probably the prime example of how they try to keep it consistent, and then Atari came in and screwed it all up. So you remember how I said there was an ice cream stand in the middle of Moontown? Well, it turns out the stand was made out of the body of an abandoned rocket ship, and is one of the parts Putt-Putt uses to assemble his way back home. 2 games later, and travels through time, Mr. Firebird's time portal looks an awful lot like the rocket Putt-Putt and Rover used, the only change being the absence of a thin green stripe around the nose cone. Okay, so Firebird repurposed the husk of the rocket to make the portal. Big deal. It's a neat callback. In the game, directly after, however, enters the race, Rover's running a cool little ice cream stand out of what appears to be the same rocket?
It's Rover Rocket Drive-In. I haven't seen my friend Rover in a long time.
Hi, Putt-Putt. What'll it be?
Firebird must have thrown it out after the whole time travel debacle. It isn't until Pep's birthday surprise that we see Rover in the ice cream stand again, looking much the same as it did before, albeit in a different location. So everything's cool, huh? The rocket-turned-ice cream shop moved, but it's still consistent with the other games. It's even down the road from a nice little bakery that just opened up in Cartown. A really cute independent bakery with a very familiar interior layout and, a time portal? No, that's the oven. Is this a modified version of the old time portal? But if so, then what the hell was Rover selling ice cream out of? Was it just some gimmick-shaped stand that he built to match the theme? And if he is using the rocket body, you mean to tell me there's some company out here who sells ovens shaped like infamous rockets and time machines? The only difference is the color change of the nose cone and the fins, but that could have easily been painted over. Even the cables plugged into the oven are the same ones connected to the time portal. I'd say get Firebird on the line, but it's evident he was finally kicked out of his lab and possibly even Cartown for endangering a minor on multiple different occasions. Speaking of the Firebird incidents, one last thing. One of the smart things that Humongous did when developing the games that set them apart from other developers is, since the Putt-Putt games are shorter and meant for kids, they included different puzzles and story beats that are randomly chosen for each playthrough. Nothing is too complex, usually just finding an item in a different location or helping out a different car than you did in your previous play. It keeps the games refreshing and fun for the kids. But in canon, I believe these variations are caused by different splinters in the timeline, which appeared throughout history as a result of Firebird's time portal malfunctioning. As Firebird said, the time portal was never meant to be a time machine to travel, just a window into those periods. With just a window, the observers wouldn't be able to interfere and change things. With the malfunction converting the window into a door, this caused fractures throughout space-time and branching paths throughout history and Putt-Putt's life, which you can see over the course of several playthroughs. This theory, I believe, is held up by the fact that the novelization of Travels Through Time is significantly different than the plot of the game. In the book, when Firebird explains the time portal to Putt-Putt, he describes it as an actual time machine, stating that it can, quote, make it possible to travel to the past and the future. Rather than a malfunction being the cause of the time rift like in the game, the book says the mishap was caused by Pep jumping in after a ball that bounced inside. He visits all the same locations as the game, but his adventure is severely shorter as he's only searching for Pep. In the future, Putt-Putt meets some robot dog, Winx, who joins him, and he later gives Winx to Firebird as a gift. Winx wasn't even in the game at all, and Firebird, of all people, should know he shouldn't keep an out-of-time object in the wrong time period. In their song, the timepiece is warned of things being different and out of place now that the time portal is open.
And everything's wrong, but it won't be for long.
So more than likely, they've been aware of the splintering of time. I wouldn't be surprised if their song is a disguised, desperate plea to Putt-Putt to find the lost objects in a hope that it will somehow be reversed. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as though this ever happened. There are a million other oddities I could prattle on about for hours, like the notion that Cartown doesn't have a consistent currency system, or the fact the sun has a face. We didn't even get into all the songs or the mentions of cameos of other Humongous Entertainment characters, like Freddy Fish and Pajama Sam. But I've already been super long-winded, and y'all are probably begging me to just shut up. So for my final thoughts, these are still great games. Yeah, I joked about the moral and ethical implications and the weird world building, but at the end of the day, they're just silly and fun kids games. They're colorful and engaging with some memorable characters and banger songs. If you're a fan of the songs, especially the Topiary Zoo song, you can find the uncompressed file uploaded by the band who composed the song on YouTube, and I'll put a link to that in the description. It's no wonder Putt-Putt was seen as the champion of children's games for a long time. A shame the series went out on such a lackluster note with the final game, but its legacy definitely outshines a single dull stone. And with that, we'll wrap up this little journey down memory lane. If you liked the video, why don't you leave a like and subscribe? Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite Putt-Putt memory was growing up. As always, thanks y'all for supporting and sticking around, and hope to see y'all in the next one. See ya.
But I don't wanna go a million